will never catch on. I assure you folks, they will absolutely never. And I'll tell you why. It's because they don't work in the cold, they don't work in the hot, and apparently you can't charge them in between, except, oh wait, there's a little place called Norway, and of course Finland and Sweden, and all the other very cold places. There's also Canada, where it also gets cold from time to time. All of these places, EVs seem to work. There's also places like Nevada and California that get very hot where they work, and of course charging is getting better all the time. So today I have brought on a little bit of an expert, Ian Graham, who lives in Canada. Sometimes he lives in Mexico, and sometimes he makes the drive in between. So we're going to get some perspective on that. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So Ian, it's terrible that you had to find out this way. EVs will never work. I'm so sorry.
It's been, I think, what is it, 10 years now? And supposedly those 10 years, things just don't work.
Yeah. Well, it turns out sometimes they do. Now, we all have heard great stories about the charging infrastructure in Canada. Would you say it is sufficiently robust for most people to not have to worry about adoption, especially if they have access to charging at home or work?
For most part. And I say for most part because Canada's a big country, and yes, and you do get the arguments from some people like, well, I'll go into this area and there's nothing there for charging and that. And I get that. I totally understand that. But again, it's the hypotheticals that blow me away on this. And, to your cold point, British Columbia, Quebec are the two provinces that have this huge EV adoption. You would think Ontario, where I'm from, would be the next number 3. It's not. It's actually Yukon. And Yukon, last I checked, is quite cold. Now, we're doing per capita with this type of thing, because Ontario is going to have way more people than Yukon. But I have friends who've gone to the Yukon, and they're blown away by the amount of electric vehicles that they see up there. And the charging network as well is also growing quite a bit that way. So...
Well, Yukon is so cold that, to me, the word is synonymous with cold and remote. So now let's talk. I mean, obviously, throughout the U.S., we've seen the charging network continue to expand. It expands for Tesla. It expands for other brands. I've had a number of guests on from other companies that build and sell public fast chargers. The network is unrelenting in its pace of expansion. But then you drive into Mexico. First of all, let's talk about the experience of driving in Mexico. Many people don't do that. I have never done that myself. I've been to Mexico many times. I've been to Tijuana more times than I can count because my grandparents lived in Long Beach, actually Seal Beach Leisure World, if that brings anyone some flashbacks. But and I've been to Puerto Vallarta, and I've been to Monterrey, and I've been to Mexico City a few times. I've been to Mexico a bit. I've just never been out either of the peninsulas. That's all right. I haven't seen a lot of EVs, but what is the experience of driving like in Mexico?
It's, so my parents drove for 25 years from Canada to Mexico. And then my dad passed in 2007, actually here in Mexico. And my aunt flew down and actually met up with my mom to drive back. And my mom was driving at that time a Ford 3500 van. And my mom's like 5'0". So she drove back with my aunt, but then she drove for another 7 years by herself from Canada to Mexico. She was quite a lady. And the thing about Mexico is I hear this aspect of like, oh, it's dangerous. And I'm not saying by any means it's not having its issues and danger, because, if we want to get into talking about cartel, depending where you go in Mexico, that can be an issue. And then, of course, you also have the aspect of the road stops. Is it Guardia Nacional? Is it Green Angels, etc.? But my experience, and this is my first experience in doing this, was very positive. And the minute I crossed Laredo, Texas, into Laredo, Mexico, it took me like half an hour to get my temporary import permit for the vehicle, to get my tourist visa, and then I'm on the road. And the toll roads is the big one where I look and I think that's really changed Mexico, because my parents did not have that opportunity. It was always the Libre, it's the free roads, and that's where you get into like the potholes, et cetera, and those issues. the toll roads were amazing. And the beauty also with driving was the Tesla chargers are basically along those toll roads and very easy to get access to. They're always seem to be by variety stores, like the Oxos is a popular one, but then they had restaurants. There were areas where a lot of the truckers would stop as well, where the chargers were. And in general, as long as you know, in this case, you let the car direct you to those proper charges, you'll be fine. I had one incident where I realized that suddenly the road turned into a Y and I couldn't get over to the right side because of a transport truck. And I had to keep going on the left side. And it took me to a toll road, which I had to pay and take for like 20 minutes down the road, turn around, go the other way, pay the toll again. So I'm paying two tolls for this stuff. And then come back to that same area. And I missed that charger by 4 minutes if I had been over to the proper side. So,
Well,
and again, first
yeah.
time you kind of learn. Yeah.
Well, that's how they get you. I think that is where the term highway robbery comes from, is the surplus tolls. Now,
Yep.
because these are new highways, in Puerto Rico, they did a similar thing where they finally put up a fantastic highway system that rings the island. And I don't remember if there were tolls on it when I was there or if they were planning to implement them when it was complete. But to drive any other way would be crazy. It's basically taking surface streets for huge distances. It makes no sense. How much were your tolls from the border to Puerto Vallarta?
So the total cost for me when I worked it out, I kept all the receipts and then I converted the pesos to Canadian, was a little over $200. And you know what? It was worth every bit of it. Charging cost me a little over $400 Canadian. Um, I hate to say, like, our Canadian money, because a dollar value has gone below 70 cents now. We're not too
Mm.
happy about that. But is it worth it? Most definitely. And the other nice thing too is on the toll slip. If you ever had a problem, you can call this number for what they call the Green Angels, and they will actually tow your car to the next toll booth. And then if you ever had a problem, and then from that point, you're kind of on your own. The other thing is if you had a flat tire or something like this, they're going to come out and give you a hand to get the new tire on the toll road. And so you just call
Wow.
this number, and I've had some friends mention to me that's kind of the situation they've been in, and they said you call the number and it's good.
Wow. So now,
Yeah.
obviously, the question I have, and this is, of course, a very serious and not at all jokey question, is how excited are you for the idea of a Kitchener to Puerto Vallarta boring tunnel that you can just drive the whole way?
Do I drive it or do I just sit back and let it happen?
Well,
Because
you'd have
like,
to let it happen. I think that's too great of a distance to stare at a tube. I think
yeah,
you'd
no
lose your mind.
kidding. And
So
and to
yeah,
that
it's
point,
just a Mexicanadian bypass.
yeah.
It's
Two funny things about this. 98% of the drive um, was done with full self-driving easily for Canada and US. Mexico, it works on the toll roads, but you still had to be careful because sometimes you'd be driving and all of a sudden there's this like pinkish purple line in the middle. And it was meant something to do with the trucks, I think, with the downward aspect of things for their brakes. But the other funny thing is that when the superchargers first went in, I noticed from Canada, it was Ontario, Quebec, because at the time we had these amazing rebates, and it went right to Texas, and then from Texas to Puerto Vallarta. And I'm like, Tesla must have looked at this and go like, well, there's lots of snowbirds coming down. Let's put in our charging network and make it so that they actually could use this because it's been around for a few years. I'm by no means I'm the first person to drive an electric vehicle from Canada. In fact, Quebec City, I have two friends who drove to Puerto Vallarta here, and one did 19,000 plus kilometers. So I don't know, do your math for the miles, but he did quite a jaunt. And the other person has now 3 years done his Model Y here to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico from Quebec City. So it's there. Yeah, and with the opening up of Tesla superchargers for the GM, Ford, etc. This is I can only see more people, hey, let's go do this. Let's have some fun.
have some fun, have an adventure. If you stay on the toll roads, you should be at least in a better situation, if not Uh, I've been in
Perfect.
a number of American cities where I wouldn't feel comfortable getting off the highway necessarily right here. Uh,
Hmm.
Now let's talk about EV adoption. First of all, air quality in Mexico, how is it?
Hit and miss, you know.
Especially
I
in
mean,
the cities.
yes. Um, when I went through Guadalajara, it's been a few years since I've been through Guadalajara, and oh my God, it was like watching a bunch of snails in the road trying to move, and it just so the traffic congestion is just nuts.
Hmm.
And I've heard that from multiple friends that Guadalajara is grown, uh, quite a bit. The air quality, would I say that I noticed it? Yeah, I would say that I did notice it. But then this is also where I look at, the EV adoption aspect of things. And, we've seen this, especially, during COVID when we didn't have the traffic on the roads. And all of a sudden, in Los Angeles, you were seeing places that you normally would not see. And India, even, there's,
The
spots that
Himalayas
the Himalayas,
from
like
Delhi.
suddenly, yeah, it's like, oh, that exists. That's over there. That's a big part. Like one of the biggest things that I have a real issue with, especially with people who don't seem to want to budge and moving. And I always ask them is like, gas transportation strains our healthcare in the billions upon billions of dollars. So asthma, emphysema, cancer, central nervous system disease, and linked to dementia and asthma. And I keep asking people is like, transportation gets us from A to B, but now as a taxpayer, you not only, you're propping up the oil cartel, dare I say, but now you're straining the healthcare, and as taxpayers, you're paying for this stuff as well. And it's such an easy fix to me. To let's use our oil in a responsible way, not burning it. That's the part of things I don't get because the burning of it in these gas engines is so inefficient. And then if we could then, in Mexico is a perfect example, Mexico City, you converted more of that city around to the better air quality with the electric vehicle adoption. I think you're going to see a huge decline in all these health issues.
And, China gets a lot of criticism for subsidizing their EVs too aggressively, but if they're responsible for the health of their citizens as well, all they're really doing is shifting that financial burden from healthcare to EV subsidies. And I think that's a
Exactly.
reasonable trade off. If you're in charge of everyone, it, you're going to treat different things differently instead of being just selfish in one area. To me, the bigger thing, and I experienced this in, of course, cities in Mexico, but cities around the world, in the Dominican Republic, there
Hmm.
are, it's not just the terrible air, it's the noise.
Yeah, and here in Mexico, we for some reason motorbikes have become such a big thing. These little dirt bikes, and I tell you, I'm up on a hill here, and at 3 in the morning, I don't really need to hear, your gonads of ego with your motorbike. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the volume of your vehicle. It's a 1 minute. Oh, that's cool. No, it's not.
No, literally no one. There, yeah, it's ridiculous. And I don't remember who it was. I feel like it might have been you or Mark who had said this, but you wouldn't let your kids play next to a highway because of the air quality, but yet you're
Yep.
just fine with them playing in the city park surrounded by cars and traffic. It
Yeah.
makes no sense. We got to get past all that. EV adoption in Mexico, there are some brands there that
Mhm.
I have not seen on the road in the US at least. What have you seen on the road?
So when I arrived, a friend and I, we went to see the BYD dealership in Puerto Vallarta, and even yesterday, the trip that I did to San Sebastian, as we were leaving, there's a BYD that is coming up. It's like this kind of interesting green, lime green color, and I stopped. As he was passing me, and we chatted for a few minutes, and he loved it. I said, "Do you have any problems with charging or anything?" He's like, "Nope, put a charger in at home, and away we go." And the BYD has some really interesting options, and they've got I think it's a C line is the new ones coming out. Price point is reasonable. I think Mexico's interesting because there used to be this real divide of rich and poor, and now we're getting more of the middle class Mexican. who are now able to, like, if you look around, there's a lot more newer vehicles in Mexico that are on the roads. We're not seeing these, 1980s boxes that are being held together with some tape and everything else. There's a lot more newer vehicles. And in talking to BYD, there's a lot of interest. A lot of people are really considering more electric vehicles. They have a truck that is a hybrid. It gives you 100 kilometers of electric range. So I'm taking a guess, 70 miles, roughly 80 miles. And then from that point, you've got another 700 with the gas hybrid, which goes kind of back and forth, similar to like a Chevy Volt was. And nice looking truck. And yeah, it's great to see the adoption. It's going to take some time, I think, with Mexico, but I think as it catches on and people start to realize, hey, for price point, and BYD's coming in at an interesting price point compared to the gas stuff. So they got some options that way and good ranges, 300 plus miles.
And BYD is a very big company. When they issue a warranty on a vehicle, I am not as concerned that they will not be around to honor it as I would
Yes.
be with some of the smaller, newer companies whose names I'm not as familiar with. Your mileage may vary, of course. And there are
Mhm.
a whole bunch of brands. I did get to see that truck back in May in Monterey. There is a lot of choices. There are probably about a dozen Chinese brands now that have
Mhm.
EVs, or in some cases, I don't think MG has brought any of their fully electric vehicles over yet, but I think they've got hybrids. So, I mean, it's a step in the right direction. And until the charging network is more fully built out, which may take some time, Mexico looks small on the map because of the type of maps we use. The projection makes it look artificially small. It is a very
Yeah.
big country, and it is the terrain is quite varied.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
anything I forgot to ask you, Ian?
Um, you know what? I think the not so much asking, but I think the big aspect of things is, like I said, I've been driving electric for going on 10 years now. I think it's amazing with Waterloo Region Electric Vehicle Association that I help run. We do a monthly podcast, but we are also the biggest National Drive Electric Week in Canada for a good number of years now. And this past that one that we had last October was over 100 electric vehicles and of all makes, models, styles. And it really is going to show that we're getting some great options. The prices, I think, are coming down in a way that is much more viable. And I think the big thing, if I can really point out, is like every time I hear somebody go with, and I mentioned the hypotheticals, I need 1,000 miles of range. Really, my bladder barely lasts, 150. But I think for a lot of people, when you're talking to someone who's not sure, you got to get that life. What does their life entail? And find out. Oh, how many road trips do you actually do? I do one or two, which is the average road trip. Okay, and so what would happen if you had to, rent a plug-in hybrid, even for that matter? Or what if you did a little research to see where you're going to actually, with the charging network? And, again, I see some people, oh, I heard this charger's broken and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, not saying some of this stuff doesn't happen, but, I think proper of putting yourself into what your life really entails and actually how much money you could save is really important. And that's including people even in apartments and condos. I know guys who drive Uber electric vehicles fully and they still have no problem, and they live in condos and they have no problem. They figure it out. Life is about problem solving. And sometimes it's a lot of fun to problem solve and sometimes it's really frustrating. But when you get there, you learn a lot.
Yeah. So guys, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Got some links to Ian's stuff in the description. Please check it out. He's a lot of fun. And what did we miss? Yeah, just let us know. With that said, you could subscribe, you could support the channel, you can do all those things. You know what you're doing. At least give it a thumbs up and stay tuned, stay juicy. I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots on the flippity flop.